The impossible dream. Mia Calloway sat in the dim light of her bedroom, her phone trembling in her grip. The cold winter air seeped through the cracks of their small apartment, but she hardly noticed. Her heart pounded like a war drum in her chest as she read the caller ID, Dr. Langford, fertility specialist. Her fingers hovered over the screen. She wanted to answer, yet she was terrified. Every call from the clinic had been the same over the past 6 years: apologies, disappointment, and another dream slipping through her fingers. But something inside her told her to pick up this time. Hello? Her voice was barely above a whisper. Mrs. Calloway, I have your results. The doctor's voice was steady, professional, but there was something in his tone, something different. Mia held her breath. Your hormone levels, they're off the charts. We need to run more tests, but I believe this might be it. The world seemed to pause. The pain of years of failed treatments, miscarriages, and lost hope pressed down on her like a weight. Was this real? She clutched the phone tighter. Are you saying I'm pregnant? Dr. Langford confirmed. And not just that. Your levels suggest something remarkable. We need you to come in tomorrow. A sharp gasp left Mia's lips. Tears welled in her eyes, threatening to spill over. Ryan, her husband, stood at the doorway, his face filled with concern. Mia? She slowly pulled the phone from her ear, locking eyes with him. We're pregnant, she whispered. Ryan's breath hitched. He rushed forward, wrapping his arms around her, holding her as if she might vanish. They had dreamt of this moment for so long. It felt impossible, too good to be true. But reality had more surprises in store. The journey to this moment. Mia and Ryan had been high school sweethearts, bound together by dreams bigger than themselves. She had wanted a house full of laughter, children running through the halls, bedtime stories, and tiny hands reaching for hers. Ryan had always imagined himself as the father who would teach his children how to ride bikes, help with science fair projects, and cheer them on from the sidelines of soccer games. But life had other plans. After 5 years of marriage, their house remained silent. No tiny footsteps. No laughter. Only heartbreak. They had tried everything: natural remedies, hormone treatments, expensive fertility procedures. Mia had endured endless injections, grueling surgeries, and the unbearable loss of 3 miscarriages. Each time, they had built their hopes up, only to watch them crumble. Each time, Ryan held her in his arms as she cried herself to sleep. Yet, they never gave up. Even when friends and family suggested they accept their fate or consider adoption, they continued their fight. And now, it seemed their patience had led them here, to a miracle. The first ultrasound. The next morning, Mia and Ryan arrived at the clinic. The air felt charged with anticipation, fear, and a fragile hope that neither dared to speak out loud. Dr. Langford greeted them with a knowing smile. Are you ready to see your baby? Mia swallowed hard, gripping Ryan's hand as she lay back on the examination table. The gel was cold against her skin as the technician pressed the ultrasound wand against her belly. The screen flickered to life, and Mia held her breath. Then, the room filled with a sound that made her heart stop. A heartbeat. Strong. Steady. But then, another. And another. And another. The technician's eyebrows shot up. Oh my God. Mia's eyes darted between Ryan and the screen. What? What's wrong? The technician's voice wavered with disbelief. There are 6 heartbeats. Silence. Then, Ryan let out a nervous chuckle. You mean, 6 as in 6 babies, Dr. Langford confirmed, staring at the screen in awe. You're pregnant with sextuplets. The room spun. Mia's hands went numb. Sextuplets? This wasn't just a pregnancy. This was unheard of. Tears streamed down her face as Ryan sat down beside her, burying his face in his hands. How was this possible? The weight of a miracle. The next weeks were filled with a mix of joy, fear, and overwhelming uncertainty. Carrying one baby was hard. Carrying 6. It was dangerous. Dr. Langford explained the risks: preterm labor, underdeveloped organs, the possibility that not all of them would survive. He spoke of selective reduction, the option to terminate some to give the others a better chance. Mia and Ryan refused. If fate had given them 6 babies, they would fight for all 6. Their story spread quickly. The moment a nurse snapped a photo of their first ultrasound, 6 tiny figures huddled together, it went viral. Strangers reached out with support, prayers, and donations. Their once small world expanded as people became invested in their journey. A race against time. By the 4th month, Mia's belly was already the size of a full-term pregnancy. By the 5th month, walking became nearly impossible. At 6 months, her doctors warned her that her body couldn't hold on much longer. Then, one night, as Ryan adjusted her pillows in bed, Mia gasped. A sharp pain shot through her abdomen. Her breath hitched. Ryan. He turned in an instant. What's wrong? She clutched his arm, her eyes wide with terror. I think I'm going into labor. Ryan paled. This was too soon. Panicked, he grabbed their go-bag, half-carrying Mia to the car. The hospital lights blurred as nurses rushed them inside. Doctors scrambled. Machines beeped. Mia's world shrank into one terrifying thought. It's too early. My babies aren't ready. The last thing she remembered before the pain consumed her was Ryan pressing a kiss to her forehead. You're strong, Mia. They're strong. We're going to make it through this. Then, everything went dark. The fight for survival. The sound of machines beeping in rapid succession filled the hospital room. The sterile scent of antiseptics and latex gloves mixed with the frantic energy of doctors and nurses rushing around Mia Calloway's hospital bed. Her body trembled as a deep, relentless pain tore through her. Her vision blurred, and for a split second, everything became a disorienting haze. She's dilated to 6 centimeters. We need to prep for an emergency C-section, now, a doctor shouted. Ryan Calloway felt frozen in place, his heart pounding so hard it felt like it might explode in his chest. He gripped Mia's hand, his knuckles turning white. Stay with me, Mia, he whispered, his voice cracking with fear. Mia turned her head toward him, her face glistening with sweat. Ryan, are they going to make it? Her voice was weak, laced with exhaustion and sheer terror. Ryan swallowed the lump in his throat. He had no answers. No reassurances. The babies weren't due for another 3 months. 27 weeks. That was all they had made it to. Far too soon. Far too risky. But time had run out. Code Blue NICU is on standby. A nurse's voice cut through the tension. Ryan looked at Dr. Langford, desperate for any sign of hope. Tell me there's a chance. Dr. Langford's expression was grim but determined. It's going to be a fight, Ryan. But we're not giving up. Neither was Ryan. Neither was Mia. And neither, he hoped, were their 6 little miracles. A delivery like no other. The bright surgical lights were blinding as Mia was rushed into the operating room. Doctors moved in swift precision, nurses lined up the tiny incubators, and a team of 20 specialists stood ready to fight for 6 fragile lives. Ryan wasn't allowed inside. Instead, he stood behind a thick pane of glass, his forehead pressed against it, his hands clenched into fists. He had never felt so helpless. The next 40 minutes felt like an eternity. One by one, the doctors pulled the babies from Mia's womb. One by one, the room filled with the sound of fragile, premature cries. And one by one, each tiny life was whisked away to the neonatal intensive care unit, NICU. Ryan barely caught a glimpse of them, tiny, impossibly small bodies wrapped in a tangle of wires, their limbs no bigger than his fingertips. The reality of it all crashed over him. They weren't out of danger. They were just beginning their fight. 6 tiny warriors. Mia was unconscious when Ryan was finally allowed to see their children. His footsteps were hesitant as he entered the NICU. The room was filled with quiet hums of ventilators, soft beeping monitors, and the faint sound of nurses whispering as they moved between incubators. And then, he saw them. All 6 of them. Each baby was barely over 2 pounds. Their skin was nearly translucent, their eyes sealed shut, their fingers curled into delicate fists. Ryan's chest tightened. They were so fragile, so small. Too small for the world. A nurse approached him, her voice gentle. "They're fighters, Mr. Calloway. Every hour they survive increases their chances." He swallowed hard. "And their chances now?" The nurse hesitated, glancing at the incubators. "They have a long way to go." Ryan exhaled shakily, nodding. His eyes landed on the tiniest one of all, baby C. She was struggling. Her breathing was uneven, her heart monitor flashing warnings that made his stomach twist. The doctors had already told them she was the weakest. She might not make it. Ryan pressed his hand against the incubator's glass, his voice trembling. "Hang in there, sweetheart. Mia wakes up." Mia's eyelids fluttered open to a world of dull, aching pain. Her throat was dry. Her body felt heavy. Then, the memories rushed back, the pain, the doctors, the C-section. "The babies," she croaked. Ryan was beside her in an instant, his hands closing around hers. "They're here, Mia. They're in the NICU." Tears welled in her eyes. "Are they okay?" Ryan hesitated. "They're alive," he said finally. That was all Mia needed to hear. She forced herself upright, despite the pain. "Take me to them. Babe, you just had surgery. I need to see them." It took everything in her to get into a wheelchair. Ryan pushed her down the hall, past the quiet hum of the hospital, until they reached the neonatal intensive care unit. The moment Mia saw them, her heart shattered. 6 incubators. 6 tiny bodies fighting for their lives. Her babies. A fresh wave of tears spilled down her cheeks. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. She had imagined holding them, kissing their soft heads, whispering lullabies as they slept. Instead, there were wires, tubes, and machines keeping them alive. She reached out, her trembling hand brushing against the incubator of baby C, the weakest one. Her breath hitched. A nurse stepped beside her. "Would you like to hold her?" Mia looked up, stunned. "Can I?" "We'll have to be careful. She's delicate. But skin-to-skin contact helps preemies." With painstaking slowness, the nurses removed baby C from her incubator and placed her against Mia's chest. Mia barely felt her weight. She was so small. So impossibly tiny. Tears streamed down Mia's face as she pressed a kiss to her daughter's forehead. "You're a fighter," she whispered. "And I'm right here with you." For the first time since their birth, Mia felt hope. Her babies were small. But they were strong. And she would fight for them, no matter what. The long road ahead. The weeks that followed were a blur of exhaustion, fear, and tiny victories. Each baby had their own battle. Baby A struggled with underdeveloped lungs and needed oxygen 24/7. Baby B had digestive issues, unable to keep food down. Baby C, the weakest, had a heart defect that might require surgery. Baby D and Baby E were slightly stronger but still fragile. Baby F had erratic breathing, his oxygen levels dropping dangerously low at times. Mia and Ryan practically lived in the hospital. They learned the beeps of each machine. They memorized the schedule of every feeding, every blood test, every risk. Some nights, they sat in the darkness of the NICU, whispering prayers over their children. Some days, they felt like giving up. But then, came the miracles. Baby A's lungs grew stronger. Baby B started eating on her own. Baby C, the weakest of them all, made it through heart surgery. The babies were surviving. And Mia and Ryan? They were holding on. For the first time since this journey began, it felt like they might actually win. The biggest setback yet. Just when things seemed to be improving, tragedy struck. One evening, Baby C's oxygen levels dropped dangerously low. Mia and Ryan had just stepped into the hospital when the alarms started blaring. Nurses and doctors rushed toward the incubator as Ryan and Mia froze in terror. "What's happening?" Mia's voice cracked as she clutched Ryan's arm. Dr. Langford turned, his expression grim. "It's Baby C. Her lungs are failing." Mia's heart plummeted. Not her. Not the weakest one. The doctors moved quickly, intubating the tiny baby and increasing her oxygen support. Hours passed in a blur of medical jargon, procedures, and helpless prayers. Finally, Dr. Langford approached them, his face lined with exhaustion. "We stabilized her, but she's in critical condition." Ryan and Mia collapsed into each other's arms, shaking. "How much more can she take?" Mia whispered. Dr. Langford exhaled heavily. "She's fought so hard. But she still has a long road ahead." They spent the night in the NICU, their hands pressed against Baby C's incubator, willing her to keep fighting. An unexpected angel. The next morning, as Ryan walked through the NICU, he noticed an elderly woman sitting by the window. She had been there for weeks, rocking gently in a chair, always knitting tiny blankets for the preemies. Ryan had seen her before but had never spoken to her. But today, as he passed her, she smiled at him. "You're the father of the Sextuplets, aren't you?" she asked in a warm, raspy voice. Ryan nodded, surprised. "Yes, ma'am." She studied him for a long moment before setting her knitting aside. "I lost my grandson in this very hospital. He was born too early. The doctors tried, but he didn't make it." Ryan's throat tightened. "I'm so sorry." She nodded, a soft smile on her lips. "Thank you. But I come here every day to pray for the babies who are still fighting. And I've been praying for yours." Ryan swallowed the lump in his throat. "I appreciate that," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. She patted his hand gently. "Don't lose faith, son. Miracles happen here." Ryan exhaled, feeling a strange sense of comfort. He didn't know why, but at that moment, he believed her. Baby C's miracle. That night, Ryan and Mia sat beside Baby C's incubator, watching her tiny chest rise and fall with the help of a ventilator. Mia reached in carefully, brushing a finger against her daughter's fragile hand. She had been so close to losing her. Too close. "Come on, baby girl," Mia whispered. "Stay with us." Ryan squeezed Mia's hand. "She will." They sat there for hours, unwilling to leave her side. Then, as dawn began to break through the hospital windows, something incredible happened. The heart monitor let out a soft beep. Then another. Then another. And then, Baby C took her first unassisted breath. Mia gasped. "Ryan." The doctors rushed in, checking the monitors, whispering in disbelief. "She's improving," one of the nurses said, smiling. "She's getting stronger." Ryan and Mia broke down in tears. Their weakest baby. The one who had fought the hardest. She was going to make it. The light at the end of the tunnel. Over the next several weeks, each baby continued to grow stronger. One by one, the incubators were replaced with open cribs. One by one, the feeding tubes were removed. And finally, after 105 days in the NICU, the doctors gave Mia and Ryan the news they had been waiting for. The babies were ready to go home. Mia and Ryan stood in stunned silence, holding their breath. "You mean, all of them?" Mia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Langford grinned. "All 6 of them." Ryan wrapped his arms around Mia, both of them crying tears of pure joy. After months of fear, heartbreak, and relentless battles, their family was finally whole. Their babies had beaten the odds. And now, at last, they were going home. A new chapter begins. The day had finally come. After 105 grueling days in the neonatal intensive care unit, after endless nights filled with fear, after whispered prayers and exhausted tears, the sextuplets were finally coming home. Mia and Ryan Calloway had dreamed of this moment for months, but as they stood outside the hospital with 6 tiny infants bundled in their car seats, reality hit them like a tidal wave. They were now responsible for 6 fragile, beautiful, and demanding little lives. Bringing the babies home. The ride home was both exhilarating and terrifying. Ryan drove carefully, gripping the wheel with white-knuckled intensity, his eyes flicking constantly between the road and the 6 newborns nestled in the back of their newly purchased van. Mia sat in the passenger seat, but her body was twisted around, her anxious eyes darting from baby to baby. She checked their tiny chests rising and falling, listening for the slightest hint of distress. What if the car seat straps are too tight, she fretted. Or too loose? What if? Mia, Ryan said gently, his own voice tense. They're okay. She exhaled sharply, pressing a hand against her forehead. I know. I get it, Ryan interrupted, giving her a knowing glance. But they're strong. They made it through everything in that hospital. They're gonna be okay. Mia let out a shaky breath and nodded, but deep down, a wave of anxiety still churned inside her. When they finally pulled into their driveway, their families were already waiting. Grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, and friends stood on the front porch, clapping and cheering as Ryan and Mia carefully lifted each baby out of the car. Tears welled in Mia's eyes as she looked at the beautiful chaos in front of her. Their home, once quiet and filled with longing, was now overflowing with love and life. The first night. A test of survival. If Mia and Ryan thought they had been sleep-deprived before, nothing could have prepared them for their first night at home. It started with soft whimpers. Then tiny cries. And within an hour, all 6 babies were screaming at once. Mia jolted awake, her heart pounding. She stumbled out of bed, her body already aching from exhaustion. Ryan groaned beside her, rubbing his face. What time is it? 2:30, Mia mumbled, glancing at the glowing numbers on the clock. Ryan sighed heavily. That means we got, what? 40 minutes of sleep? Something like that, Mia groaned. The next few hours were a blur of diaper changes, bottle feedings, and desperate shushing. Ryan rocked 2 babies at once while Mia tried to burp another. Meanwhile, baby D refused to settle, her tiny face red from crying. Why won't she stop? Mia whispered, bouncing her gently. We just fed her. We changed her. What else could she need? Ryan yawned, swaying side to side with another baby cradled in his arms. Maybe she just wants to be held. Mia groaned. I am holding her. They were overwhelmed. Exhausted. And absolutely terrified. But when dawn finally broke, casting a soft golden light over their chaotic living room. Mia looked down at the babies curled up against her chest and smiled. They had survived their first night. Barely. But they had. Adjusting to the chaos. As the days turned into weeks, life in the Calloway household became a carefully managed storm. Feeding schedules were mapped out with military precision. Each baby had their own designated color-coded pacifier. Mia and Ryan developed a shift system so that at least one of them could grab a few hours of sleep at a time. But even with all their planning, things never went smoothly. One morning, as Mia tried to juggle 4 crying babies at once, the doorbell rang. "Ryan, can you?" "Got it." Ryan called from the kitchen, where he was frantically warming bottles. Mia swung the door open, fully expecting a family member dropping off supplies. Instead, she found 2 news reporters standing on the porch. The female reporter, dressed in a crisp blazer, smiled brightly. "Mrs. Calloway. We're from Channel 7 News, and we would love to do an exclusive story on your sextuplets. The world has been following your journey, and we think." Mia slammed the door in their faces. Ryan poked his head around the corner, an eyebrow raised. "Who was that?" Mia rubbed her temples. "The media." Ryan groaned. Again? The past few months had turned their lives into a spectacle. Ever since the viral hospital photo, where all 6 babies had been cradled in their father's arms, the world had become obsessed with their story. Mia and Ryan had been bombarded with interview requests, sponsorship deals, and even reality TV show offers. But all they wanted was peace. Privacy. And maybe, just maybe, a full night's sleep. Financial struggles and unexpected help. Raising 1 baby was expensive. Raising 6 babies? It was financially devastating. Diapers. Formula. Medical bills. The expenses piled up faster than they could keep up. One evening, as Mia sat at the kitchen table, staring at a stack of unpaid hospital bills, her chest tightened. "Ryan," she whispered. "What if we can't do this?" Ryan, who had been bouncing baby E in his arms, looked up. "What do you mean?" Mia swallowed hard. "What if we can't afford to take care of them?" Ryan exhaled, rubbing his forehead. "We'll figure it out." Mia shook her head. "How? We're already drowning, and it's only been a month. What about when they're older? When they need clothes and school and—" A knock interrupted her. Ryan sighed. "If it's another reporter, I swear." He opened the door and froze. Standing there was Mrs. Dawson, their elderly neighbor from down the street. She held a small envelope in her hands, her kind eyes twinkling. "I heard about your struggles," she said softly. "And I wanted to help." Ryan opened the envelope, and his breath hitched. Inside was a check for $10,000. Mia gasped. "Mrs. Dawson, we can't accept this." "Nonsense," the old woman interrupted. "Years ago, my husband and I wanted children, but we couldn't have any. When I see your family, I see a miracle. And miracles deserve a little help." Mia burst into tears. She had spent weeks feeling like they were drowning. But for the first time in a long time, she felt hope. A future full of possibilities. That night, as the babies finally drifted to sleep, Ryan pulled Mia close. "We're going to be okay," he whispered. Mia nodded against his chest. "Yeah. We are." They still had a long road ahead of them. But for the first time in months, they weren't afraid. Their family was strong. Their love was unbreakable. And their 6 little miracles? They were just getting started. Growing pains and unbreakable bonds. Life in the Calloway household had settled into a beautiful, chaotic rhythm. The sextuplets, Ethan, Ava, Liam, Noah, Sophia, and Bella, had officially entered their toddler years, and with that came an entirely new set of challenges for Mia and Ryan. Gone were the sleepless nights of newborn cries and endless bottles. Instead, their days were now filled with tiny feet running in all directions, crayon-covered walls, and an orchestra of giggles and tantrums. Raising 6 toddlers at once was like trying to tame a hurricane while juggling flaming torches. And yet, through the chaos, their family thrived. The trouble with 6 toddlers. Mia once thought changing 6 diapers at once was the hardest part of parenting. She was wrong. Now, she was dealing with 6 mini tornadoes who all had minds of their own. One morning, as she entered the living room with a fresh cup of coffee, she stopped in her tracks. The walls were covered in purple and blue crayon streaks. Ava stood proudly in front of the masterpiece, gripping a crayon in each tiny hand. "Mommy, look! Pretty!" Mia squeezed her eyes shut and inhaled. "Don't yell. Stay calm." She opened her eyes, forcing a smile. "Ava, sweetheart, we don't draw on walls. Paper only." Ava blinked, tilting her head. "Why?" Before Mia could respond, Liam ran past them, completely naked. Behind him, Noah and Ethan were chasing after him, laughing hysterically. Ryan stepped out of the kitchen, a horrified look on his face. Sophia just dumped her breakfast on the floor. Mia groaned, rubbing her temples. This was their life now. A never-ending roller coaster of messes, meltdowns, and madness. Finding individuality in a sea of siblings. Despite being born at the same time, each child had a unique personality. Ethan, the firstborn, was the quiet and observant one, always watching before jumping into any situation. Ava was the artist, creative and dramatic, always wanting to make things pretty. Liam was the troublemaker, fearless and full of energy, leading most of the house's messes and disasters. Noah was the peacemaker, always comforting his siblings when they cried. Sophia was the bossy one, convinced she was the leader of the group. Bella was the sweet one, always hugging everyone and saying, "I love you." As they grew, Mia and Ryan made a conscious effort to treat them as individuals. They made sure each child got one-on-one time with their parents, even if it was just a quick trip to the grocery store or a bedtime story all to themselves. But even with their differences, the bond between them was unbreakable. Whenever one of them got hurt, the others rushed over to help. When a stranger tried to separate them in daycare, they refused to play unless they were together. They were each other's world. A day in the life of chaos. 6 a.m., the first cries start. Mia and Ryan take turns pulling sleepy toddlers into their bed for snuggles. 6:30 a.m., chaos erupts. Someone doesn't want to wear socks. Someone else doesn't want oatmeal. Someone is crying for no reason. 7 a.m., breakfast is served. Most of it ends up on the floor. 8 a.m., the great dressing battle. Getting 6 toddlers into clothes is like trying to wrestle 6 tiny, slippery fish. 10 a.m., playtime. Which usually turns into an epic sibling war over the same toy. 12 p.m., lunchtime. More food on the floor. More meltdowns. 1 p.m., nap time. Also known as Mia and Ryan's only chance to breathe. 3 p.m., more playing, more running, more crayon-on-wall incidents. 5:30 p.m., dinner. Mia wonders why she even bothers cooking real meals. Chicken nuggets win again. 7 p.m., bath time. The house floods. Again. 8 p.m., bedtime stories. Someone refuses to sleep. Someone else suddenly has 1,000 questions about dinosaurs. 9 p.m., silence. Peace. Mia and Ryan collapse on the couch, too tired to move. This was their life now. And they wouldn't trade it for anything. The financial burden of 6 kids. Raising 6 toddlers wasn't just exhausting. It was financially overwhelming. Diapers. Clothes. Food. Medical bills. Every month, they felt like they were barely keeping their heads above water. One evening, Ryan sat at the kitchen table, staring at their bank statements. "We're spending $1,200 a month just on groceries," he muttered. Mia sighed, rubbing her temples. "And that's before we factor in daycare, doctor visits, and everything else." Ryan exhaled. "Maybe I should get a second job." Mia's heart sank. Ryan already worked long hours. If he took on another job, he'd barely see the kids. There had to be another way. Then, one day, an unexpected opportunity arrived. The viral photo, again. Mia had almost forgotten about the viral hospital photo of Ryan cradling the newborn sextuplets. But one morning, her phone buzzed with an email from a national talk show. They wanted to feature their family on an upcoming episode. Mia hesitated. She and Ryan had spent years avoiding the media. They didn't want to turn their children into a spectacle. But the email mentioned something else. A generous financial gift to support the family. Mia swallowed hard. Could this be the answer to their struggles? She and Ryan sat down that night, discussing the pros and cons. "I don't want the kids growing up in the spotlight," Ryan admitted. "Me neither," Mia agreed. "But, if this helps us give them a better life, shouldn't we consider it?" In the end, they agreed to the interview, with strict conditions to protect their children's privacy. And when the segment aired, everything changed. A surprise that changed their lives. The day after their episode aired, Mia received a call. It was from a wealthy businessman who had been moved by their story. "I grew up in a large family," he said. "I know how hard it can be. I want to help." Mia's breath hitched. "What do you mean?" "A trust fund," he replied. "For your children's education and future." Tears welled in Mia's eyes. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious," he chuckled. "Consider it a gift, for your little miracles." Mia couldn't speak. She could only sob into the phone. Their prayers had been answered. They would never have to worry about their children's future again. Looking ahead. As Mia watched her 6 toddlers chase each other around the backyard, she felt a deep, overwhelming gratitude. They had struggled, cried, and fought their way through the hardest years of their lives. But they had made it. And their future? It was brighter than ever.